Agencies, 1.7%, and YESS, all on today's Fednobabble.
Welcome to today's Fednobabble, where we take your questions and explain the federal retirement benefits and make them understandable for humans in under 20 minutes.
And we take these questions from the Fednobabble.com website, where you can go and submit them, or from the workshops I do. So let's jump into question number 1. What happens with health insurance when I retire? Is there a uniform answer, or is it per agency? Cassie, what do you think?
What happens with health insurance when I retire? Well, it depends on what you choose to do with your health insurance options.
As always, it depends. Yes.
There is no uniform answer because as long as somebody has met their 5-year rule, they can continue to take it in retirement. And as long as you're not a postal employee, then the government's going to pay the same amount. The premiums stay the same. The only difference is you don't pay on a 26 pay period basis. You're paying per month. So it looks a little bit higher on a monthly basis as opposed to paying every 2 weeks. But I think that's to be expected. But the cost amount that's covered with the government is the same. This is not a per agency thing.
Yeah. Yeah, the per agency thing is really, really interesting because I'll say this. Almost everything works the same for federal employees, no matter what agency you work for, until it doesn't.
Right.
Right? And
Yeah.
and they're few and far between, but it does depend every now and then per agency. And trying to nail those down when it does and when it doesn't, it can be pretty difficult. And so sometimes you don't know when it. So I would just say overall, assume that it's the same for everyone until you hear otherwise. And that otherwise, unfortunately, most of the time won't come from HR, because HR knows what that agency's HR does and assumes that it is the same for every agency. That kind of information typically only comes from people like you and I, Cassie, who we work with people from all federal agencies, and it doesn't matter what agency you come from. And then you
Right.
start noticing the differences. And it doesn't work like this for you, even though it works like that for everyone else, or vice versa.
Right.
So you have to have something to contrast it with.
Yeah, I also think that working with a financial professional who is seasoned
Yes.
and vetted with working with federal employees, they are also going to know most exceptions. Like postal employees is a very common one where, their FEGLI and FEHB are just different while working, but then it's not when they're not working. And so that's one example where it's a per agency basis, right? Because it's just the postal service. So it's not like, my agency here in, Washington State or Seattle, Washington, or whatever is different than the one in, Norfolk, Virginia or something, right? Like the postal service it's just the agency of USPS.
Yeah.
Right. And that's most of those employees, right? All of the, there are certain postal employees that qualify for a different exception, and they still have to pay the same as any regular FERS employee. And so, but any trusted advisor or any advisor really who has had experience with federal employees and has been working with them for a while, they're going to know these certain exceptions that are common in their area. And I didn't turn off my phone, so just one moment. Somebody's calling. Well, I should say I did turn off one phone, but then I didn't turn down the other phone.
Gotcha. How many phones do you have, Cassie?
Just two. personal and business.
Yeah.
Sorry
And
about that,
so
guys.
I will also say, that's one of the things I love about your report is that you catch these things as well. And when you run the report, you'll throw those in and say, this is different than
Yep.
normal. This is not the same. Beware, because you want to make sure that you're setting them up right for this situation.
Absolutely. And this is, oh man, I'm looking at all of these different things. You know, if there are different types of employees, if they're a CSRS offset who's Social Security, and, you know, Social Security, whose Social Security and CSRS deductions are not being taken out properly, you know, if they've had option C with FEGLI for longer than they should have, or, you know, any of those different
Yeah.
things, we're looking at those and we are getting that information back to the advisor to how on how to properly plan for those types of employees, so that way they can, you know, go back to you guys and say, hey, check it out, this is what needs to be fixed, here's how we can, you know, take care of that, and let's move forward with getting this benefit taken care of, and you know, whatever needs to happen. So
Yep. Perfect. Good, good. All
yeah.
right, question 2. I have 1 year under law enforcement. Will I get 1.7 for that year? My other years are under FERS. Now, when this person is talking about this, um,
Mm-hmm.
it is the pension formula, because for the first 20 years in the pension formula, they use, instead of 1.0 or 1.1, they use 1.7.
Yep. All special provision employees, firefighters, law enforcement, air traffic controllers, um, Customs and Border Protection. They're a little bit different, but
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, they are required to have 20 years in that special provision um, service in order to have the 1.7 factor. So the answer here, unfortunately, is no.
Right.
They will not get the 1.7 for that 1 year. They most of the time have to have 20 years of special provision in, service in order to qualify for that 1.7 factor. CBPOs are different because they've only been considered law enforcement since July 6th of 2008. And so that's a little bit of a different story. They get an exception because obviously it hasn't even been 20 years.
Right.
And you know, there's some other factors that go along with the special provision employees as well. And so, you know, in this transition time of, you know, going from the regular FERS system to law enforcement officers, and being considered special provision employees, then there's some different calculations there. But overall, though, if you worked just generally 1 year as a firefighter, or 1 year as a law enforcement officer, or 1 year as air traffic controller, you're not getting that 1.7 factor for
Right.
that time.
Yeah, I remember meeting someone at one of our workshops, in-person workshops, and they got a little, I don't want, they got a little concerned, I'll say, because they had 19 years
Oh,
as special provision, as a law enforcement. And
yeah.
and he said, "So are you, wait a minute. 19 years, that doesn't put me in my 20. Will I get 1.0, 1.7?" I said, "You'll get a 1.0."
Oh,
And he goes, "Oh no, I have to get back in somehow for 1 year as law enforcement." I said, "If you can, just 1 year in one more year in law
yeah.
enforcement, you're going to get a decent bump up to your pension." And so he
Yeah.
had to go back and figure out how to make that happen.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
Yeah, it's
That's
so many people
tough.
don't realize. They think, oh well, maybe I had 5 years and I had 10 years or 1 year even, you know, and
Yeah.
I'll still qualify for that higher pension factor. But that's simply not the case,
No.
unless you've had a special waiver or something like that. I mean, like I said, there's always different exceptions for these types of things, but generally the rule is you must have 20 years of special provision service in order to get that higher pension factor. So.
Yeah, and going back to the concept of the last question, again, like you mentioned, CBPO, that's a little
Mhm.
different. That agency, it's going to be treated differently. So, again, like you said, for the most part, that's how it works, but there are exceptions as well. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Question number 3. What is with this Social Security thing for the end of this year and the beginning of next? I
Oh
love
man.
I mentioned this in one of my workshops, and someone said, I said, you know what, you're going to have to, I said, here's real basics, but you're going to have, talk to your financial professional about this. And they just said, whoa, 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 wait a minute. What is this? So, Cassie, why don't you explain this a little bit?
Okay, there's a lot of heat going on about the Social
Is
Security
there?
deferral.
I assume there would be.
Yes.
This is not
Okay.
good.
So let me just lay out what the program is before we get into all of the heat that's going on with it. Okay.
Okay.
But essentially, the president signed an act where Social Security will be deferred from September 1st to December 31st.
4 months.
Yeah, 3-4 months. Okay. Now it's only deferred. So that 6.2% that normally comes out of your paycheck for Social Security or OASDI, you'll receive that in your paycheck. Okay. But from January 1st until April, you'll pay double into Social Security. So rather than just having the 6.2 withdrawn, you'll have the 12.4 taken out of your paycheck.
Okay.
Okay. Why this makes sense, I'm still trying to figure that out, but I don't apply logic to government policy. Okay.
we never try to do that here. So let me
No.
just kind of put this into numerical perspective if I could.
Mhm.
From September 1st to December 31st, for these September, October, November, December, for these 4 months here,
Mhm.
federal employees have no way out of this, by the way.
Nope.
This
There
will
is no
happen.
option to opt out.
If they make less than 4,000 a month. Is that right?
4,000 gross. Yes.
Gross. Okay.
However, you have to think about all the pre-tax things that are taken out before the gross income is in effect, right?
Good point.
I mean, your TSP, your healthcare,
Yeah.
right?
And then 4,000.
And then is the
Gotcha.
4,000. So I was reading something the other day where they had higher than anticipated federal employees in this program because they didn't
those
take into
pre-tax.
consideration to the pre-tax, right? However, USPS has decided not to
Agency specific again.
agency specific, right?
Right.
So the employee themselves have no option to opt out, but apparently the whole agency as a whole can because USPS has decided they're not going to do this. Okay. But then I was just reading something this morning and it was just barely brief overview as I had kids running in and that was saying there's something on that in the house or whatever about it possibly having an option to opt out or something. I don't know. Either way, there's a lot going on with this. I cannot guarantee that it's going to last because this just wasn't a well thought out plan.
No. No. And so again, let me go back to numerical perspective here.
Mm-hmm.
From in August, people are paid one amount. In September through December, they're going to see a 6.2 increase overall to their paycheck. In December, they will see a 12.4% reduction from what they were getting in December.
From their pay, absolutely.
That's significant.
And this is very significant. I mean, if you're having $200 taken out for Social Security,
yeah,
right, then you're going to have $400 taken out. And then what about taxes? And so that was one of the things that was included in that thing that I was looking at. The article this morning was, well, what if employees have taxes to pay and things like that? Then that dips into the amount that they have to save for tax season, right? Because that's around that same time. And so there's just a lot going on, the committees. And I know there's some
Yeah.
people pulling to get this taken out, because it's just kind of ridiculous. I'll do something for myself, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, when you first alerted me to this, because I didn't know about it, and you told me about this, I was beside myself that there's no option to get out of this for federal employees. Well, besides postal now, I guess. But wow, wow. I don't know. If someone wants that, I think that's great. But
Mhm.
if someone doesn't want it, which I would assume that most federal employees would not want that to happen because they're still working,
No.
right? Then now, and I will say, President Trump created this, and I'm assuming that OPM or whomever decided that the federal government workers were this was going to happen to federal government workers. So President Trump made it an option, and whoever made this a reality, just I don't know who that is or what.
Right.
I'm assuming it was at the OPM level, but wow, the things that they
Yeah.
just
Oh,
make happen.
one thing I want to include too is if somebody separates during the next,
Mm-hmm.
okay, if you are going to be retiring or separating from service and delaying your retirement or just walking away and taking a refund, whatever that looks like, if you separate from the federal government and you are subject to the Social Security deferral
Right.
program, excuse me, where they are, where you're receiving that extra money, you're still going to be responsible for the extra Social Security amounts that were deferred beginning of next year.
Out of pocket.
And, out of pocket, I don't know what that looks like. There's not, they didn't explain how that was going to work out, whether they're going to take it out of, if you get a second job or something, whether they're going to take it out of there or if they're
Right.
going to bill you, right? How does that work? Um, that's unclear. They just simply state that you'll still be responsible to make up for those deductions that weren't taken from your paycheck.
So you know what? We have this episode slated for a little later. I think we might have to move this way up so that people get the
I
information ASAP.
Yes, I think this one is
Yeah.
super important to get up and going because people need to understand exactly how this works,
Yeah.
right? If they are retiring, especially if they're retiring this year,
Mm-hmm.
because then their annuity is not
Hmm.
going to start right away and they're going to be subject to those interim payments plus a 12.4%
Oh.
on whatever that was for Social Security deductions,
Oh.
right? This could
Wow.
seriously put somebody in a really bad financial spot,
Mm.
um, that they might just want to delay retirement another, 4 to 6 months just because they don't want to have to deal with that increase or receiving that bill if they don't have enough savings or what have you. And so this is something that really needs to be strategized with somebody who understands how to work the different financial buckets together so that way,
Yep.
somebody's not really screwing themselves, to be honest, the
Yep.
first 3 months of retirement.
Yep. And that's why, again, that's why we make these reports available so that people, I mean, I don't want to say especially if you are retiring right now, because this could go for someone who just started their federal employee service as well to make sure they're
Mhm.
on track. But boy, this can help those who are retiring really soon, especially by the end of the year, to make sure
Yeah.
that they are on track. And so if anyone goes to fednobabble.com and signs up, we will put you in touch with one of the advisors in our trusted network that will reach out to you, and Cassie will do the report and go through it and
Mhm.
make sure everything is good, and then the advisor again will sit down with you and just make sure that you have the numbers that you thought you had.
That's
That
it.
things like this, because things like this don't show up on an HR report. There,
Right.
this is out of the scope of that, but these are the
Mhm.
kind of things that you'll be able to see. So go there to fednobabble.com, and if you want to ask a question, you can also go to fednobabble.com and submit that. And if we use your question, we will give you some Fednobabble paraphernalia, some shirt or mask or I don't know, something like that. That'll be fun.
Yes. And don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your coworkers. They need to understand how this all is going to work with them as well, because maybe they don't understand the Social Security deferral program either. So please, whatever you can do to help make sure that other people get empowered and, get their questions answered as well. So
great. All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you next.